This is about defending democracy. This is no longer Democrats versus Republicans. What do you want your kids to believe in? There must be give and take.
This is White Flag with Joe Walsh.
He's a comedian, and we began following each other on Twitter, I don't know, a few years ago. Maybe we started firing at each other when we first started following each other. I don't know. His name's Jay Black. He's a great follow, by the way, and I'll say this a few times on Twitter, at Jay Black is funny, at Jay Black is funny. Comedian, screenwriter, producer, just does a lot of interesting shit and weighs in on politics, which is something I really like. His website, by the way, I'll push this a few times as well. jblack.tv is his website. Hey, mister.
Yeah.
Good to be with you.
Joe, it's a pleasure. This is fantastic. I've been following you for a long time, and I think I followed you because I came back to Twitter 2020. So I think I followed you post-Epiphany.
You did?
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I think we didn't know each other prior to that. So, yeah,
Good.
I was off of Twitter for like 4 years. From 2016 to 2020. Not
Why?
really sure what was going on then.
What were you? Why were you off?
So I was just burnt out on it. I was not in a good mental space.
Yeah.
Comics are not known for our stability mentally.
Yeah.
And I was talking to a therapist, and I was like, well, I'm getting into an argument. At the time, it was egg people. Because remember, if you didn't have a profile pic, you were an egg. And it's like, I'm in an argument with an egg who's got 6 followers. And my therapist was just like, are you happy doing this? And I was
Time out.
Yeah, I was like, I don't think I am, actually, no. And I just took a break, and then as the pandemic hit, and I lost my audience, like going out live to perform in front of people, I found Twitter to be a nice methadone to the heroin of getting up in front of people. And what was lovely about coming back to it was I was in a much better headspace, and it was a lot easier to just sort of disregard. And listen, if you get any kind of notoriety at all on Twitter, you know this at a factor of 10 greater than I do. You have to grow a thick skin. I always say get a callus over your soul. Because people will come at you again and again and again and throw that flack up. And it's just nice coming back. I find myself ignoring trolls a lot easier.
That's interesting to know, Jay. I didn't know that. So you did not know back in the day, musket grabbing Tea Party Joe Walsh. You didn't.
I think I may have seen your musket grabbing tweet.
Still my favorite tweet, damn it. Still, it made news.
Yeah, I think that was sort of my first awareness of you. And, I say post-Epiphany. I am to the left of you. And I know that I'm probably more to the right of some of the people that I follow and like. I guess. But one of the things I always say, because some of my real leftist friends, some of my socialist friends will go, these guys in the Lincoln Project, you can't, they're ideologically different than you. And I'm like, I know. It's all right. I miss when I had friends who were ideologically different than me and we could have a civil conversation, because that's how ideas are created when two people who disagree say, we got to find common ground on this issue. It's where we had problem in the Trump years and now is that it's groups of people who are so parochial, so religiously bonded to their ideology that, if I'm talking to you, it must mean that I'm losing some sort of leftist bona fides. And it's just like, no, that's just not how a democracy works. I'm sorry that you feel that way, but a democracy is about different ideas.
So, hey, Jay, you're a comedian. You've been in it how long?
I've been a full-time professional comic for 16 years, believe it or not.
Wow. Are most, let me stupidly generalize. I will make a statement. The vast majority of comics and comedians are lefties, correct? Or no?
So I'm going to say no. And well, okay, what I'll say is about 2/3 are probably to the left.
Okay.
about a third, especially in places like Long Island, Staten Island, parts of, blue collar areas, Cleveland, Pittsburgh. There are a contingent of right wing comics. And they're like anti-political correct comics. They're the ones that are like, hey, I hate political correctness, and then they go on. You can sort of tell that they are right-leaning.
Right.
I would say the thing that runs throughout all comics is an anti-authority idea, and it just depends on what your perspective of who's in power is.
Yeah.
Because if you're somebody that thinks the people who wear white collars and are bankers are in power, you're probably a left-leaning comedian.
Yeah.
If you're somebody who thinks that the contingent of political what's the word I'm like? Identity politics are in power, you're probably a right-leaning comedian. But everybody is sort of bonded in the idea of let's poke who we think is in charge.
Could you be, Jay, is it possible, and maybe you can give me an example, can you become a big fucking huge popular comedian, stand up, and be a right-wing person? Like, could you be a Seinfeld or a Dave Chappelle or anybody and be right-leaning? I guess I'd argue you couldn't.
So I would say, like, if you look at, for instance, like a guy like Tim Allen,
Yeah.
right, who is a right-leaning comic. Now, did he get famous on his politics?
No.
He didn't. He got famous on, making grunt noises, which is how Trump got famous as well. But it comes out that he is a right-leaning comic, and I know that he would argue it has hurt his career. But I do have to point out he was on TV for 20 years. He's worth over $250 million. Disney just gave him a TV show, The Santa Clauses, right?
Yeah.
So he's not been hurt by that at all. I think what it is
But
that
he's the exception, correct?
There's a guy like Sebastian Maniscalco, right? His latest special was not right wing, but it was right leaning. There was some conservativeness in there, and I didn't particularly like the special. I don't know if it was about the politics so much as I just think that he was like trying a different thing. I don't know how much it worked, but I do think that like comics who tend to get revered, I'm not going to say famous, but revered,
right.
like the Carlins or the Pryors of the world, are ones that tend to hew left.
Well, and I think, Jay, tell me if you disagree. Look, I come from the right.
Yeah.
I still am a man of the right. Not this right. I don't know what the fuck this right is, but I'm still a man of the right. And the big beef among my people has always been Hollywood is liberal, or they're all lefties. And I think generally, my answer has always been generally left of center people get into acting and writing and the creative arts and comedy. Right-wing people get into banking and making money. I mean, so it makes sense to me that comedians generally would be left of center.
Right. I think it's honestly, and this is going to sound insulting, but hear me through. I think that, there is a certain level of empathy, a natural empathetic thing that you need to do to be a writer, to be an actor, to be a comic, right? You need to be able to walk in people's shoes. And to do that means, generally speaking, vilifying or looking down on people. I'm phrasing this incorrectly. I think what it is that once you're empathetic, it is very difficult to be conservative. And here's what I mean.
Fuck you, Jay, but continue.
Well, yeah, if you look at what if you look at societal conservatism, built into that word is a status quo. I want to keep things the way they are. I want to conserve things as they are, versus a progressive point of view, which is I want to go to somewhere else. I want to go to the next place. And when you look at any kind of pushback on any societal movement, whether it be race in the 50s, gay in the 70s, transgender now. There's a group of people that are going, I want to keep it the way it is. I don't like it. I don't like this new idea. I got to have gay teachers. I don't want gay teachers. I think that there's a level of empathy that comes with, well, they're just people too. That is, sort of an artist's point of view is we're all people. And
AJ, that's a really good point, and that's fair, and I'll concede that because, and by the way, even though I've always been of the right, I'm kind of I'm libertarian generally. Like whenever I think of a conservative, I think of like an angry white guy. But it's fair. You're fair. Conservatives generally resist change. That's fair. I remember when Bush came out with the phrase, he said, "I'm a compassionate conservative."
Sure.
And that pissed people like me off because, like, I'm a conservative and I think I'm empathetic. I just don't want government doing a shitload of stuff.
Sure.
And so we argue about how much government can do, but conservatives do a lousy job of displaying their empathy. I would agree with that.
Yeah, and there was a time, the 1,000 Points of Light with George Sr. And, there was a time, I'm a child of I would say a young adult of the 90s, where it seemed like there were certain things that we all agreed on. And one of them was, like, for instance, we didn't quite know how to do gay rights in the 90s. Like, we didn't get it right. But I never got the sense, and again, I'm not a gay guy, so I don't know what they were feeling. But I never got the sense that people felt as overtly antagonistic as they feel now, left or right. Yeah. The right felt like, well, we have to at least couch it in going, well, we don't want the government saying this, but everybody has a right to exist. Or don't ask, don't tell in the military. We got it wrong, but it just felt like there was a little bit more of a center of, we need to figure this out, and we have different paths to get there. Whereas now it does feel a little bit more like the right has gone completely off the deep end. When I say the right, I'm not talking about you, Joe. I'm talking about
absolutely
the MAGA Republicans, where now you're either a white Christian cis male or you're a groomer, and that's where I think it becomes super problematic.
Well, that's so true, Jay. And look, you know this, like, fear underlays a lot of this, like the right base, the Republican base, the Fox News audience is mostly middle-aged, older white guys and women. And we forget, like, even with gay marriage, same-sex marriage, I mean, it fucking changed in a nanosecond. I mean, Obama and Hillary opposed same-sex marriage like 15 years ago. It's been an earthquake all to the good, but it's like, and I talked to so many of these white Republicans over the last 10 years, and it's like their world is changing in a nanosecond.
And they want to keep it the way it's always been. And, if
1954, Jay, I want it to always be 1954.
Right. And even their memory of 1954 is Leave It to Beaver, which my dad would always say to me, you realize this isn't how we live, right? Like, my grandfather worked in the Navy Yard, they were very blue collar upbringing. He said, we didn't live in neighborhoods like this. My mom worked at the racetrack as a waitress, like, she wasn't at home in pearls and high heels making us mayonnaise sandwiches. It was a much different time. And I do think when you hear sort of the white male, like, I want to go back to the 50s. They want to go back to a 50s that didn't exist. They want to go back to this idea that was presented, ironically enough, by Hollywood as to what the 50s were. And it is fear. It's this fear of change. And I do wish that, they could understand that progressive used to be a good word. Progress was what everybody wanted, was to get to the next place, not to be where we are right now.
What did your old man do for a life?
So my father was a mortgage banker for a
number
of years.
We share that. You and I share that.
Oh, really? So my dad, banker, and then he left and started his own business when he was in his 40s. and that still stayed in the banking world. I was originally going to be an econ major like my dad, and I switched to English, which was, my dad was thrilled. He said, "Were you going to be the vice president of poetry interpretation at a big company?"
And by the way, Jay, shut the fuck up. I changed to, I was going to be poli-sci. I changed to English as well. Continue.
Really?
My
Look
God.
at this.
My
It's
God.
common ground. And I became a high school teacher for 7 years. And then I left high school teaching after getting tenure to be a comedian, which again thrilled my father. It's like you could set your watch by that job. And I'm like, I'm going to go talk about my penis in public for a living, Dad.
Wait. Back up. That must have been a big fucking interesting move. To
It
go
was.
from a teacher
Yeah.
to a comedian on your own.
Well, so
Why?
I was doing stand up on the side. I started when I was in my second year teaching. I'd met a girl, and I was like, I want to impress this girl.
That's how it always starts.
It's always that. And I said, it's not going to be my body or my salary. Maybe I'll make her laugh. So I went to an open mic 2 weeks after meeting her. And 5 years later, she was my wife, and I was making enough money doing comedy that I could leave. So I put in my resignation. And 2 weeks later, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. She came out with the thing.
Yeah.
And I always think if it had gone the other way, you and I would not be talking right now. I would be prepping lessons for next week.
Wow.
Because I would have never had the guts to do it. But I had already turned in the resignation. And, it's been a stomach ache for ever since. Because I'm always constantly worried that I'm not going to be able to make enough money doing this. But so far, I've been able to.
Jay, just a business question. So, and
Yeah.
again, this comes from an ignoramus who's not in the industry. So we see the big famous comedians,
Yep.
studs who make, Chris Rocks and all the rest who make a shitload of money. And there got to be a gazillion guys out there struggling way down here. Mm-hmm. To me, you'd be in an exclusive club if you're actually making a living doing that.
Yeah, there is a middle class. There's a small band of middle class, and we all kind of know each other. I was just doing a show last night with Dean Edwards, who's a great comic, and we all know the same guys. We all sort of hang in the same circles. And it's possible to do, and it is, because most people think you're either Chris Rock or an open micer.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
when I first moved in, I live in a regular suburban neighborhood, and it was funny because my first day moving in, I'm meeting people in the cul-de-sac, and they're like, "Well, what do you do?" And
What
I'm
do
like,
you
"I'm
do?"
a comedian," and they're like, "Yeah, but okay, but what do you do?" And I'm like, "I'm a comedian." No, but for money, what do you do? Because you're obviously So it's there's like college work, corporate work, cruise ship work. I mean, there's work that pays very well.
But would you say, Dave? Would
you
you say you're of the minority of comedians? Like, I'm sure that
Yeah.
Chris Rock's, that's a minority. The
Right.
open mic guys, I've always assumed is most.
Right.
So there's a thin band of people like
that
you who are making.
I'm in the thin band, yeah. So
Okay.
it's much smaller at the very tippy top, as you'd imagine. And there's a lot of people that are professional, semi-pro, that have other jobs and they make money on the weekends doing this. But the guys who are full time, I would hesitate to say it's over 1,000. I mean, there's probably between 500 and 1,000 of us that can say that we do this full time and live relatively comfortably.
Are you
That's the back of the envelope.
Are you constantly hustling?
Yeah, I mean, like there's some gigs that are you get and you kind of know that you have them.
Okay.
And it takes a while to get them, but then you're like, okay, I feel pretty good about that. But just like anything else, I started writing screenplays on the side.
Yeah.
And I started a business to start making those movies, right? And it's a hustle, but it's kind of the hustle that, as my wife says, as I complain about it, you're getting to do exactly what you wanted to do, so you really can't complain about it. I'm like, well, all right, but I will still complain about it. But yeah, it's you get to do what you want to do, but it is as we always say in the business, I don't get paid to do comedy. I get to do that for free. I get paid to travel and to deal with the booker trying to get the gig. That is what I'm getting paid for, because it's a real pain in the butt.
So there's an issue I've always wanted to get involved in with you, and it's got to do with politics, and it's always been a beef of mine. But I want your expertise, and I want you to push back on me. And I think the only way I can do this is to just lead with maybe an idiotically stupid overgeneralization.
Sure.
So I'll do that. Political correctness or wokeness is fucking ruining comedy. Now, there's a big part of me, Jay, that I'm not a comic, that believes that. How do you respond to that?
So the best way I can put it is this. I don't believe that. I think that political correctness has made comedy better. In the sense that there are a multitude of voices now. I don't have a problem with a comic talking about their experience. There's no issue whatsoever in that. I'm a married guy of Italian and Irish descent, little Lithuanian thrown in there. You can tell by how big my head is.
By the way, that's a dangerous mix. But go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, it's combustible. I talk about, I grew up Catholic. I have 3 kids. I talk about that at length, and people relate to it.
Yeah.
I don't talk about, gay people or transgender people or black people because I am not one of those things. And my observations of those things would be that of a tourist at best, which is I can view your life from here, so I have some thoughts about that. And I think for the longest time, there was a group of tourists coming through and making fun of, areas that they only spent a weekend in. And then, we talked about this a little bit, but Marjorie Taylor Greene coming to New York City and saying, it stinks. It's filled with homeless drug addicts. It's like, you don't live here. You don't get to talk about it. But I do think because of political correctness, and I'm putting quotes around that, but you know what I'm saying? The idea that there are black comedians that talk about the black experience. There are gay comedians that talk about the gay experience. There's transgender comedians talking about the transgender experience. And we get that multitude of voices, but what we don't get is people on the outside poking in with the same frequency or a feeling of invulnerability that they used to have. And if I can just, I'll give you, for instance, in something that is not very volatile. There's an old hacky joke about planes, which is people would say, every time there's a plane crash, they find the black box afterwards. Why don't they make the whole plane out of the black box? It's an old hacky joke, right? And it's built, if you are someone who knows about planes, you would think that this joke is ridiculous because you go, well, no, you don't understand how this works. There's a lot that goes into it. With the black box is designed, and they would explain it would cease to be funny. The first time someone told that joke, it was probably pretty funny because everybody was like, yeah, why don't they make the whole plane out of the black box, right? I think about any time there is a TV show or a movie about, like, say, Congress, right? I'm sure you watch and go, that's not anything like it is in real life. So why are they doing this? But ultimately, that's harmless. Because if you're somebody that, nobody is attacking Boeing for not making the plane out of the black box. No one, people attack Congress, but for different reasons. But, when I write my Lifetime movies, I don't consult with a doctor about how comas work. If I did, none of my Lifetime movies would work. But these groups that are marginalized, if I'm making a joke that's kind of based in that same kind of ignorance from a distance as a tourist, there are harmful stereotypes that can be reinforced and are reinforced that actively hurt those communities. So the question I have is, why would I make those jokes? I don't know what their life is like. So if I'm making a joke about their life, I could actively harm them. So why do that?
Jay, that's really, that's such an interesting perspective. And I respect it, but I want to push back. I guess 2 reactions. Are you saying that 2 straight white guys like us, if we were both comics, we couldn't and shouldn't make fun of black people or Muslims or transgenders?
So I don't think it's a matter of couldn't, because we live in a First Amendment society. And if you say, like, when people say I'm getting canceled, you're not getting canceled. You're just getting pushback, and deservedly so. It's other people exercising their First Amendment rights to tell you to shut up.
Yeah.
But when I say shouldn't, the thing I always say to people is, when I perform at a corporate, and they're paying me, and they say, here are the list of things that we don't want you to talk about. You're performing at GM. Please do not make fun of GM cars or management. None of us go, I can't believe I'm being censored. We all go, well, of course, that makes a lot of sense. There's a lot to make jokes about. I don't have to make fun of GM cars.
And I get that. And a private company should be able to do whatever they want. What if GM had rules when you were doing a routine there? These are certain groups of people that we don't want you making fun of.
Well, they do. I mean, they don't come out and say we don't want you to make fun of, black people or gay people or anything like that. But what every single hirer at a college, corporate, or cruise ship, anywhere where there's people that want comedy that they don't have to get a stomachache about, they'll say, we don't want letters. That's what they'll say. And, they mean emails. So just do whatever you do. So long as I don't get a letter when this is over, I'm happy. Right.
But Jay, isn't that bad? Like, okay. And I'm going to ask, I'll ask it like this. Are you fucking telling me that one of my favorites, and probably one of your favorites, that if you had done that to Dave Carlin 40 years ago,
George Carlin.
Thank you, George Carlin. That George Carlin would have fucking agreed to something like that? Like, we don't want letters.
Right.
Carlin would have laughed at something like that.
Right, but Carlin also went on Johnny Carson and didn't say the F word, right? So when Carson, we all have a threshold of rules that we are agreeing to, and it's the old line. Ma'am, would you have sex with me for $1 million? You would. Would you have sex with me for $10? What kind of woman do you think I am? We've already established what kind of woman you are. We're just negotiating on the price, right?
Yeah.
That's the exact same thing. It's like we all have certain inherent censors as to what we will do, meaning that George Carlin will go on Johnny Carson and not curse because he knows Johnny Carson helps his career, and he's willing to modify what he does on stage for that. So, I think he would agree to the rules. It's just that, 40 years ago, there weren't a lot of black and transgender and gay comics out there who had a voice. So a guy like Carlin who would come in and sort of talk about these things, I think was maybe more necessary than it is now. No one needs me to have an opinion on the transgender community because I don't know. What would my benefit be?
Well, but that's so interesting, Jay. You're a straight white guy. You've got opinions on all sorts of things. You've got opinions on politics. I love some of your back and forths on politics. And I get that, and we agree on this. Like, you're never saying couldn't because we live in a free society.
Absolutely.
So you can get up.
And just so you know, I am open to the idea that there is a straight white cis comic out there who has a perspective that is super interesting and super hilarious about an experience beyond his own. I'm not saying that is an impossibility. What I'm saying is it's kind of like a bazooka, right? You don't fire a bazooka willy-nilly anywhere, in behind the lines, because you could hit some of your own people if you do that. You need a highly trained special moment to fire that bazooka. And my question is the joke you're saying or that you're fighting for as a cis white comic, is it so good? Is it so wonderful that it needs to be done and you have to find the right time to say it? Or is it just you think it's kind of funny and you don't like people telling you that it's inappropriate for you to make that joke? If it's the latter, write a new joke. If it's the former, you'll be heard eventually.
And by the way, my friend, I find this so interesting because...
Oh, yeah, me too. I love talking about it.
And by the way, everybody listening to us, Jay Black, follow him on Twitter at @JBlackIsFunny. Check out his website, jblack.tv. A working, successful, funny comic. We live in this political time right now, my friend, where my fucking former party is just off the rails. They're anti-democracy. They're authoritarian. They're anti-truth, all of that. I'm kind of in the middle now. I'm homeless. I think the Democrats have their own issues.
Sure.
And I think the far left tends to push some of this stuff a little too hard, and people in the middle, are confused. And like, we never want to get to a place, do we, where there are certain groups of people that should be off limits to comedy.
Right. But so I'll say this. I was talking to a gay woman, lesbian, about writing. And she said, how many lesbians have you put in your movies? And I was like, well, I haven't. But the reason was I didn't know if I could. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't know if I was allowed, because one of the things that you do when you're writing is you inhabit that person and you try to speak to their mind. And she gave me an insight that I thought was a pretty good rule of thumb. She was like, well, gay people. You're allowed to write about people that you know. You're allowed to write about your observations. Where it becomes problematic is if you tried to write a story that told a lesbian's story, that was basically trying to say, like, this is my experience as a gay woman in the world. That becomes problematic because I don't know if you have the insight to do that, Jay. But if you put a gay person in your story, you know gay people. You're allowed to do that. You're just not telling their story. If you don't tell their story, that's where it becomes a problem.
You're a writer too, my friend. Couldn't great, talented writers get to that place through research and talking to, gay or lesbian people enough? I mean, I think of some of the greatest novelists of all time, who did this and developed characters and spoke from those characters based on the research and that they did.
I think it's possible, and I certainly think at a time 100 years ago where perhaps a gay person or a black person or a transgender person wouldn't get a publishing deal and couldn't speak for themselves. White men needed to step up and do it because they were the only ones who could.
That's a fair point.
But I think in today's world, and I'm to relate this back to comedy, I'm not going to not talk about gay guys, in my act, or, because I don't feel like I have the right to talk about my own experiences. I can talk about my own experiences. If I meet a gay person and they come on to me and I come on and I tell a joke about how I got hit on by a gay guy, and isn't that funny? That's fine. I think that's okay. Where it becomes problematic if I go, hey, and another thing about the gay community, it's like, well, who am I to talk about the gay? What do I know? What
if, Jay, that's so interesting, because what if what you have to say is funny? Like, what if what you some of your observations about, say, black people over the years, as a white guy, this is what I've observed about black people. Oh my God, boom, 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 boom. I mean,
if I mean this, if I had a joke that was, I thought, so important and perceptive and incisive about a community that I was not a part of, I would work real hard to find a way to frame that joke and put it out there. And I do think that is possible. I think that there are brilliant comics who see the world and they're able to come up with insights that maybe the people inside that community haven't had about themselves yet. That said, I think that is the very, very, very rare 0.01% of the world versus guys like, we all trade in easy stereotypes and easy jokes. It's like, when you do a cruise ship, we always say nothing counts at sea because we're just trying to survive, right? You're on there. If you've ever performed, every comic does a buffet joke on the cruise ship. We're all embarrassed that we do a joke about the buffet because it's the easiest thing. But we need to fill that 35 minutes, Joe. We're filling that time, and that buffet takes about 5 minutes. None of us would do that back at home because we all know that joke is not an important joke. It's not a joke that anybody's going to go, oh, wow, that guy had a lot to say about buffets, and they really opened the door.
Yeah.
Right? Where I think it becomes problematic is, those jokes that we tend to talk about when we talk about gross stereotypes, or like, this is what I've noticed about that, Irish guys drink a lot. Great. Thank you. Wonderful insight. We get that. What have I said that has really improved anybody's mindset about Irish people if I say Irish guys drink a lot? Did my family drink a lot? Yes, they drank a lot. Do I drink? Yeah. Did I used to drink a lot? I used to drink a lot. These are true things about the Irish community, but not incisive things. And why say anything that isn't incisive if you're trying to build a career based on how smart and funny you are?
I want to push you hard on one thing. And I go back to George Carlin.
Yeah.
He couldn't say fuck on Johnny Carson. I don't know if that was Johnny Carson. I think that was a broadcasting.
Right. And NBC.
Right. NBC licensing deal. And you made a really good point that even in Carlin's day, there weren't the transgender and the gay and lesbian and maybe even the black comedians to the level
right.
that we've got now. But I still, Jay, find it hard to believe that if you put a sheet of paper in front of Carlin and said, these are certain groups of people you cannot make fun of.
Right.
I can't believe he'd abide by that.
So I don't agree. I mean, I would agree with you. He probably wouldn't abide by that. I also don't think that Carlin, just knowing what I know about the guy, would be on the side of punching down on these people. I think it would be, he would be on the side of, well, let's make fun of the people making fun of them before he would go after them. Just knowing what I know about Carlin. And when we talk about these things, I don't believe that there should be a list of commandments that comedians follow, right? I'm talking about my personal point of view on this, having done this for 15 years. There's a lot to talk about in this world. There is a lot of jokes to be made and a lot of different perspectives to be had. And the first thing any comic will learn is that if you write from the personal first, number one, no one can steal your bits. Right. And number two, it'll make you stand out. So I do write from the personal. And when I see the vast majority, especially of younger comics that I see, right now the joke I see all the time is the I identify as. Yeah. Right? I see 15 different versions of, well, I'm doing great in baseball because I identify as a 10-year-old boy, so I get to play T-ball. And it's just like, it's not, okay, fine. It'll get a laugh at a comedy club. And, somebody's going to tell you, hey, that's not a great joke. And you're going to go, well, what are you censoring me? No one's censoring you. It's just a bad joke. What door have you opened to talk about the trans community except the underlying idea that your identification is arbitrary, right? There is an underlying idea there that hurts people by making that joke over.
So Jay, my comedian friend, what you're saying is, no, you don't want there to be a list of commandments or rules when it comes to comedy.
I don't.
Let the market rule. And if some straight white comic wants to get up there and do a 45-minute routine ripping transgenders, let him have at it. And if people think it's funny, great. If they don't. But you think it's better comedy if a transgender comic is making fun of his or her own?
Well, yeah. I think everything's open to be mocked. It's great, but I don't want to hear listen, I'll go back to the tourist idea.
Yeah.
If someone goes to New York for a weekend and then comes back with their observations about the average New Yorker, I don't give a shit. You don't have, what your observations that the subways smell? Great. Thank you for that. That's wonderful insight. But if a New Yorker tells me about New York, and let me tell you about the problems that are in New York, well, that's interesting to me because that's somebody who understands the area. Whenever I go to a new town, I do a show in Pottstown, PA, and you can see the nuclear power plant from where you perform.
Right.
You know, you can see the big things. So I always make a joke about, you know, it's great to do comedy in front of a group of people that don't care about mutation or some level of that. That's a funny little poke from a tourist, and that's okay. But like when I talk about like people speaking about, you know, any community, I'd rather hear from people inside that community. That is, you know, people make fun of their own. That's what they do. And if they're talking about their community openly, isn't that far more interesting than my perspective on a different community?
So I'd answer it, Jay, and I'd say it all depends on how funny the person is.
Sure.
And you could be much funnier mocking transgender people than a transgender comic could be. I guess it all depends on how funny the joke is. But like, so you look at Jay, like a guy like Chappelle, is it just because he's so fucking big, he can do whatever he wants? Like he can punch down and mock transgenders, and it's because he's Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, I think with Chappelle, and this is my own personal theory, I think that he made a couple of jokes and he didn't mean anything by them. He was being silly, and he got pushback on that. And I think he got his hackles up, and then he doubled down, and then it became a thing. And where I think that if I can be on the other side for a second, I think that one of the things my friends on the left needs to do is figure out a way to off-ramp rage, which is when someone messes up, we often don't allow them an easy off-ramp to go, hey, you know what? As I look back on that, I probably shouldn't have made that joke, and I apologize. And I think that if we had an easier way of accepting people doing that, off-ramping the rage. I see it with Trump fans. We don't allow Trump, like when someone gets religion and goes, holy shit, I can't believe I followed this guy for 5 years. He's a lunatic. There's a lot of people go, no. You're just doing that now because blah, blah, blah. And I still hate you. You liked him. Joe, you said you're going to get your muskets. So it's like, you got to off-ramp people when they see the light on something. So I think that because my friends on the left don't do a very good job of allowing people to go, as I've thought about it, yeah, that was stupid. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. Then people tend to double down.
The whole point of any movement is to embrace converted souls. I mean, embrace them.
Well, I just give you, for instance, in my own life. I used to do a bit because I talk with my hands a lot, and I used to, this hand does this, and I used to do a bit where I go, I'm not gay. This hand is gay, you know, and I'd wave at people, and it looks like a stereotypical gay hand. I cut the joke on my own. No one came up to me.
Oh, you're so damn politically correct, Jay Black. Why'd you cut that joke?
I'm going to tell you why. Because what is the fundamental aspect of that joke? I don't want people to think I'm gay, right? That is the underlying aspect of that joke, that gay is bad. And if I'm sitting there and I'm a gay kid in my audience, if I'm a college student, I'm taking away from that. Straight guys are afraid to be gay. I don't like that, right? Straight guys don't like gay guys, et cetera, et cetera. So I took it out. Nobody told me to. Nobody said it was a bad
But what,
joke.
Jay? But stop, Jay for a minute. And I hear that reason.
Yeah.
But what if you were just making a funny, humorous observation that gay men wave their hands a little bit differently than guys like you and I do? That's all.
There is a way in on that. There is a joke that does that, but I don't think my joke was doing that.
Okay.
And I think, and the point I'm trying to make is that over time, if you hear enough jokes about something, whether or not it's true, you tend to believe the stereotype and you internalize the stereotype. And if you're a comic who is making a joke that's based on a stereotype, and listen, people are going to go through, they're going to look at my comedy. I mess up all the time. I'm not sitting here as Buddha or Jesus telling
my God,
me that this
you
is...
and me both, Jay.
I'm speaking in a sort of platonic ideal as to the way this should work.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, if you're saying something that hurts somebody or a group of people, it better be really good. Like you better have a really good idea behind it. And I just don't think a lot of guys do. I think a lot of guys find something that works and they keep doing it and they go, it's funny, without ever thinking about why it's funny or how it affects people.
That's a fair observation. You, because of what you do, you are an astute observer of humanity. And I guess the danger here, Jay, is in your line of work, in many ways, stereotypes just, and they always have, they do work. I mean, I'm Irish. The Irish love to drink. You're an Italian. Italians, man, are demonstrative. They're all mobbed up, first of all, and they're demonstrative. I mean, stereotypes, Jay, kind of work. Or actually, I'll ask that as a question. Do they, or maybe they don't, and we've just pushed them for years?
So I think it's two things. I think it is the stereotype works because we see a lot of it and we go, well, yeah, that seems true. It wouldn't get a response from people if there was no basis in truth. If I said, hey, have you noticed that a lot of Catholic people feel guilt? And if everybody went, I don't think so. I've never seen a guilty Catholic person in my life. It wouldn't work. As a Catholic, I'm feeling guilty about everything that I do at all times of the day and night. I think, engaging intelligently with a stereotype is fine. If everybody's aware of the stereotype and you go, hey, have you noticed that people think this? And you talk about it, well, that's okay. I think where it becomes problematic is if the stereotype replaces reality, and that's what everybody is basing things off of. Like if all you know about a group of people is the stereotype, that's a problem. Because if you have never interacted with an Irish person before, all you know is that they're drunk, guilty, angry men, right? That's all you know. And you go, well, that is dangerous to be an Irish person going through an area where all they know is the stereotype of the Irish.
Maybe you were raised like like this Irish Catholic boy was raised. And I still do it as an adult. I'm married to a lovely Jewish woman, Jay, and I was raised that when you go out to eat, no matter what you ordered, you eat what is put in front of you.
Oh, yeah.
Period.
Yeah, absolutely.
And my dad would whack us upside the head. You just eat what... My Jewish wife, Jay, if she'll order something, if a freaking French fry is out of place, she's calling the whole staff over.
Right, yeah.
And so then that feeds a stereotype that cracks me up. But...
And what I'll say is, Joe, I think that there are groups of people that because of the and I'll use the word privilege. I know that's a loaded word, but we're white straight guys. In all honesty, there's not a lot of places where we are out of place, right? In America.
Yeah.
We don't deal with, like, if someone goes, you Irishes are all drunk, we don't go, wow, this could really hurt me in the workplace.
Right.
Because there's no more signs that say no dogs or Irish need apply, right?
Yeah.
There used to be signs like that.
Yeah.
And I would argue 150 years ago, if someone made that joke, you and I would probably get pretty angry about it. Because we would go, whoa, hold on. That's a bad stereotype. I'm going to tell you why that's a bad stereotype. Because it actively hurts us for people to think about that 150 years ago. Now, if you just extend that out and say, all trans people are blank, right? There's already an inherent bias against trans people in this world. And if I start dealing with stereotypes, good or bad, but mostly bad, and I'm helping to reinforce those stereotypes, that group of people is actively being hurt because there is no privilege that is assigned to them yet. I'd love it if we were in a place where 50 years from now, we were all part of the big brotherhood of man, which is another loaded word. But if we're all part of the brotherhood of man, then I can make fun of my Italian friends. I can make fun of my Irish friends. I can make fun of my friends that are not going to be affected negatively in society by a perpetuated stereotype. I think it's difficult to do that with groups that don't have that privilege yet.
So my last question on this one, Jay. And I don't know that this is a good or a bad thing. In your mind, has the pendulum, the political correctness woke pendulum, which needed to swing, has it swung too far in your profession? I only ask that because I've gotten to know a lot of Hollywood people who have embraced the new Joe Walsh the last 5 to 6 years.
Yeah.
And Jay, a lot of these Hollywood writers, directors, and actors privately will tell me that, oh my God, Hollywood is so fucking woke. I've got a great idea for a screenplay. It's a buddy movie, 2 white guys on a road trip, but I can't even think about trying to sell something like that because it's got to be a white guy and a black woman, or it's got to be, you know the deal.
Yeah.
And they all complain about, and these are good, genuine, committed left-leaning people,
Sure,
who privately complain about how far the pendulum has swung in their biz. Do you feel like it's swung too far, or do you hear some of that in your business, or not really?
Well, I mean, so to me, it's free market right now.
Yeah.
I think that, like, you look at, like, for instance, Fast and the Furious movies.
Yeah.
Okay, they're action movies, but they are big, multi-racial, world-leaning groups of people all working together. I mean, the lead is a mixed race guy. There's black people, white people, Asian people all working together. Is that woke? No, it's good business, because I want to sell my movie in China. I want to sell it in Europe. I want to sell it everywhere. Mm-hmm. When I do movies, I make movies for a lot of movies for Lifetime. I always try to hire a woman director. Is that woke? Well, maybe, but what it really is I'm a white guy. I'm writing for women. I'd like to have my scripts filtered through the mindset of someone who understands that world better than I do. So me hiring a woman in that scenario, I think, is just good business. I think in the world that we live in, there is a lot bigger audience than has been given credit in the past, and appealing to the widest audience possible is smart business. So is it woke, or is it, I mean, it's Hollywood. It's the same thing like when Don Jr. was making fun of, like, woke banks. There's no such thing as a woke bank.
What the fuck is a woke bank?
My dad was a banker. These are people that would step over their own mothers to make 1% more in interest. There's no woke banks. So Hollywood is woke, the same way a bank is woke. They're going to try to make money at every turn. So
yeah, and I don't look. I'm still conservative, and I am proudly woke, because I wasn't aware 6 or 7 years ago that there were basic systemic injustices.
Sure,
I've gotten smart to it. I've woken up. I wish the left wouldn't run away. I know the right tries to bastardize that term. I wish the left would still embrace woke. And so I agree with you. You put it well, Jay. It's the market. Let the market dictate. The things that piss me off are when, and the Academy, where there's this effort that, okay, we've been giving white people too many awards. This year, we've got to give more awards to black nominees or Asian nominees.
Right.
When the awards should go to whoever the hell you think did the best, no matter what the race is.
Right. So, I mean, one of the things I always go back to is the Rooney Rule in football. You know the Rooney Rule?
Yeah, absolutely.
Where you can't hire a white coach till you interview a black coach.
Exactly.
And it was this really minor change that, if you look back on it, you go, well, that wasn't a big deal. But it was a big deal, because what it did was it forced management to do something they had never done before, which is, even if they were bringing in a black coach to interview out of, pro forma, like, we have to do this because otherwise it's we look bad or we're breaking the rule. It led to a lot of black coaches being hired because they were like, wow, this guy really knows what he's talking about. And it forced people to reconsider. And I do think that if we were in a completely equitable world, all of this stuff that we do is stupid. But we're not in an equitable world. So, yeah, I think that, is it ham-fisted? Oscar's so white, start looking at black people more? Yeah, that's probably ham-fisted. But the other side of it is, well, why haven't black people gotten an award for 45 years?
Well, why? And what's interesting, Jay, maybe you and I agree with this. Okay, it's ham-fisted. Shouldn't we look at black actors more? Yes, that's good. We should. the bad is, okay, now we got to automatically give black actors awards.
Right. And I think that even the people, in the quiet moments, if you were to ask the people advocating for this, is this the best system? They'd all say this is not the best system. The best system would be that it's all colorblind and we just pick the best actor or actress in every category. But this is better than no system. So what's the next system? So to what I would say to my friends on the right is, instead of pushing back and saying, no, it's all equal. Let's just make it all equal. Well, how? How do we get to a place where it's all equal? And, I do believe in a free market. I do believe it's a whole bunch of individual choices. And, even going back to the stuff about comedy, these are individual choices that I make because I think ultimately that gets us to the place that I would like us to be at, which is we're all just in a big family and making fun of each other.
Jay, do you do much on college campuses?
So I was a 3-time college comic of the year. So
wow.
I did a ton. I've done about 1,000 campuses. I'm a little old to do them now. I still get to do like 5 or 10 a year, but I think, once I start getting a little bit of gray, people are like, I don't know if this guy's who we want to hear from.
That's interesting. But have you sensed on college campuses over the years the climate has changed as to who you can mock?
So I'll say the one thing that I've noticed about college kids that is difficult as a comic, at least for me, is that Kurt Vonnegut once said the key to making someone laugh is to create tension and then release it. Right? Yeah. Why'd the chicken cross the road? I don't know why did the chicken cross the road? That's a good question. To get to the other side. Oh, very funny. That's great. I think that this generation, at least, I don't like to speak in broad generalizations about generations, but I think kids have been told now, the moment they feel uncomfortable, raise your hand and say, I don't feel comfortable. Which
Instead
is
of
great.
Working through it, yeah.
Right. It's a great thing if your boss says you need to have sex with me to get this promotion. Raise your hand and say, this makes me feel uncomfortable. But when I'm telling a joke, I need to make you momentarily uncomfortable. You don't even know what the punchline is yet. The punchline is going to release all this tension in a very hilarious way, I promise. So I'll like, my mother-in-law is deaf, and I'll talk about, some stuff. And I've had problems where I've said, so my mother-in-law is deaf, and before, right, you can feel the tension. Like, is he going to be ableist? It's like, no, I'm going to talk about my mother-in-law. Just give me a second so I can get to the part where I talk about my mother-in-law. What I try to do is, being aware of this, I open the door early on and go, listen, I'm going to just make jokes here. And I'm not going to make my goal is to not make anybody upset. Is to make you all laugh. So give me the benefit of the doubt. And I think we're going to get to a good place. And if I mess up, like if I use a word that you're not supposed to use, like that isn't me trying to shock you by using that word. I didn't know that was a bad word. There's words for transsexuals that I didn't know was bad until someone came up and said, we don't use that word anymore. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I didn't use the word anymore. So I try to let them know ahead of time, I'm not coming from a place of trying to piss you off. I'm coming to a place to make you laugh. But it's problematic because you do get a lot of like, which you don't get at comedy clubs so much. But
Jay, that is so fucking interesting. And thank you for that, because that's kind of clarified a lot for me. And that makes sense. Younger people today have a harder time than we did with dealing with that momentary tension or uncomfortableness. And it's good. Whereas you and I grew up, what the fuck? I mean, yeah.
Well, so I'll tell you a story about my dad, Joe. When I was in 2nd grade, I had a bully on the bus stop.
Yeah.
And my dad said, all right, tomorrow morning I'm going to come down. He's a 3rd grader. He said, I'm going to come down. I'll fix this for you. And I said, great. So my dad goes down to the bus stop. This is in the days when parents didn't go to bus stops. And he got out of his car, and I still remember him, and he was in his rain jacket and his suit. And he goes, hey, Eli, I hear you and my son are having problems. So you're going to fight. I'm going to watch you guys fight. And then after the fight's done, we're not going to have any more issues. And I remember looking at my dad going, I could have done this. And he was like, yeah, should have.
You should have.
And then he watched us fight, right? He forced us to fight.
And you did fight.
We fought, yeah, and we were at second grade. Nobody gotten hurt. We just, did.
Oh, tell me you kicked Eli's ass. Come on.
No, it was more of a draw. It was
Okay.
a draw. Neither of us got knocked down, but we fought. And then when it was all over, two things I said. I got two big takeaways. One, Eli never bothered me again, and I realized sometimes you got to fight when there's a problem. And two, never go to my dad with a problem because it was going to get. But this idea of, I think that there was an ethos prior, our generation and before, which is handle it. Whatever the problem is, like, I'm not going to fix this for you. You got to go fix it. Go fix it. Whatever that is, you got to fix it. Fight through whatever tension you have and come out the other side. And I think for the most part, moving away from that has been pretty good, because it has stopped teachers from taking advantage of students. It's stopped bosses from taking advantage of workers. But I do think that there are problems in self-regulation of issues that as a comic I have to ameliorate going in.
Is it? And Jay, is it like again? I grew up 7 boys, 2 girls in our family.
That's a hell of an Irish family, right?
It's a big old Irish family. But I grew up. My dad and the generation I am grew up with the stupid, phrase, "Sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me."
Right.
And it was this notion that words are words and words are not a punch in the face.
Right.
I worry that today, words for so many people today have become punches in the face.
Right. Well, I mean, that generation said that, but they also, drank a fifth of vodka every night.
More than a fifth. More than a fifth.
You know what I mean? It's like, so obviously they were dealing with a lot of pain that they weren't talking about in a kind of constructive way. So I think. But
is there some truth? Is there still some eternal truth in that?
Yeah,
in your mind?
I think there is. There are. I mean, you have 1,000 trolls. I probably have 100 trolls. But people that after everything I post talk about how stupid I am and ugly I am and fat I am, and it doesn't I don't know what it is. It doesn't affect me. I just go, okay, well, if you were here in front of me, there would be no problem because we would you wouldn't say this. You're just saying this because of the way the internet is situated. And I do think that teaching people how to sorry, my wife is calling. It's not like my wife doesn't know that I'm doing a podcast right now. It's actually, Joe, on my phone doing podcast. Please do not call. And
oh my God. Does she know you're talking to a former member of Congress? This is bull. I can't work this way, Jay.
I told her this. So I just had to do that. But I think that, my son has a speech impediment. It's called apraxia. Makes it difficult for him to talk. And, my wife and I have had a lot of conversations about this because she wants to protect him, which is understandable. He's in high school now. And she's constantly worried about how kids are reacting to him. And at a certain point, I just had to tell her, look, he's going to get made fun of. He just is. And part of the growth experiment of life is him going, all right, how do I deal with this? How do I tell people ahead of time, look, I talk a little funny and you're going to have to deal with that. I'm not slow. I'm pretty smart. But you're going to have to deal with the fact that I talk a little funny. And, I think it's I don't want to make it gendered. It's a mom thing versus a dad thing, though. It's he's got to get hurt. Because he needs to grow that callus. And he made me laugh. He was like, I'm just going to start telling people I'm from Denmark because nobody knows what a Danish accent is. And I just tell people it's a Danish accent. I was like, that's actually really smart. I would do that if I were you. But, when I hear people make fun of him, do I want to hit them in the head with an actual rock? I do.
Yeah.
But, I do think him learning how to deal with that's important.
Hey, two more questions. And I'm so loving this conversation. We live in absolutely fucking horrific, chaotic political times. You and I could talk for a whole weekend about how we got here politically. Our system's broken. Trump's just a symptom of a broken system. Yeah. Bad symptom. In what you do for a living, comedy, Do you lean into the politics? Do you try to avoid it? How do you juggle that?
I used to do a lot more politics in the Obama years.
Yeah.
It was I don't want to say less partisan, but it was less. There was less of a chance of someone giving me a death threat after the show in the Obama years.
Yeah.
And the thing, you go back to everything that we talked about with regards to comedy.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've said often is that Trump gave people who felt like they couldn't talk
Yeah.
a permission structure to say things that they were told they couldn't say.
Bingo.
And the things they said were wrong. A lot of it was, racist and sexist and homophobic. But there was such a push, and I've said this many times to my friends on the left, we got to get better advertising. We can't be scolds. Because
thank you, Jay.
If we're scolds, then it allows people like Trump to come along and go, don't listen to those people. Be like me and say whatever you want. Don't you want to be like me? And that permission structure opened the door to a lot of people becoming worse, I think, than they were originally as they bonded themselves to Trump. But the long and short of it is the political aspect of things now, I speak in very general terms.
Yeah.
I used to have a joke about Donald Trump being like Star Wars Episode 1, which is when I went into Star Wars Episode 1, I feel like Trump fans must know what it's like because I went in going, this is great. I can't wait to see this. And then about 18 minutes in, I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. This looks terrible. And I found out two things. One, Trump's fans didn't feel that way, and more people liked Episode 1 than I thought.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd get Trump fans coming up to me like, I talked about this with Rick Wilson a little bit.
Yeah.
I never had walkouts in the Obama years, but if you make fun of Trump, people will walk out and shout stuff at you on the way out. I mean, this is how connected this guy is with a certain aspect of the populace.
Hey, Jay, it's a cult. I come from that cult. It is a cult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's so weird because it's a cult that is ostensibly about Christianity. And, we're recording this before Easter. Joe, you're Catholic. I'm Catholic.
Yeah.
I tend to remember no gold idols. In like number one on the list of commandments was no gods before me.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I went through a lot of CCD and a lot of Bibles camp over the summer.
Yeah.
All of this is unchristian. All of it. It's very unsettling to me as a guy who spent a lot of time in Catholic school.
But yet on Twitter, you lean into some politics on Twitter.
Oh, big time on Twitter.
Big time. Yeah.
And for me, Twitter is, an active, piece of, I don't want to say trying to affect change because I don't know how much change you can actually affect on Twitter.
Yeah.
But, the idea of being parochial is built into Twitter. Like you don't go on there and say, guys, I'm just going to do a center path. And it's the main benefit of Twitter, but it's also the main problem with Twitter, which is it doesn't allow for any kind of nuance whatsoever. And I think that's where you have run into trouble, where it's like you're a guy that says, I hate Trump, but I'm also a Second Amendment guy.
Yeah.
And a lot of people on the left are like, how is this possible that you don't like Trump, but you also like weapons? Joe, it makes no sense. And you go like, yeah, but human beings are like that. So the Twitter just has a little bit of a compression algorithm there.
Hey, two final ones, my friend.
Yeah.
One bigger picture, one personal. The bigger picture is this: I'm older than you, and I am a dark Irishman, and I've taught American history. I've read American history. I'm worried that this thing called the American experiment can stay together.
Yeah.
When I speak in front of groups of people, I come off as more bearish than bullish.
Right.
Where are you, Jay Black, on the American experiment? Are you more bullish or bearish?
I'm more bullish now than I was 3 years ago. Had Biden lost, had January 6th been successful, I would probably be in a bearish place. I do think, Trump is an unpopular figure. There are 60% of the people in this country that don't like the guy.
Yeah.
And I think understand that he is not what America is supposed to be. Where I become nervous is at the state level.
Yeah.
When I see my friends in Tennessee kicking out congressmen, when I see these very outlandish gerrymandering, the kind of anti-democratic stuff that happens in the state and local level that isn't very glamorous but is very damaging to the country. I get nervous. But I do think that if there's anything, if you want to talk about American exceptionalism, we're real good about liking the freedoms that we have.
Yeah.
And I do think that the second those freedoms start to come under attack, we get pretty, I always think about Frank Sinatra. Frank Sinatra, he's a liberal guy. He was a manly man. He would be canceled today. But, you read interviews with him and it was just always like, hey, this is America. And there are certain things in America. And then he would go on and he would list things that I really love about this country. I do think that there are patriots on both sides that won't allow someone like Trump to undo 245 years of representative democracy. I just don't see it happening. And maybe that is too optimistic, but I saw a rainbow the other day, so I'm in an optimistic mood.
Hey, that's the Italian in you. That's not the Irish in you. That's the Italian. Hey, final question, personal question. What's one thing you wish people understood about you?
That's a really good question.
It's my favorite question. You can take as much dead air as you want. What's
you know
one
what?
thing you
Can I
wish
come
people
back in
understood?
a month? So I would say that I think as a comic, you people tend to think that you're cold and remote, or you're always kind of throwing bombs from a distance. But you don't become a comic unless your antennae are a little bit more sensitive. Yeah, and they're always kind of twitching. And I try to explain this to my wife, because she'll be like, how come you go to a party and you just sit in the corner and watch? Yeah. And I'm like, well, that's what I do, but it doesn't mean I'm not connected. It just means that I'm watching, and I'm watching and processing all the time. And it doesn't mean that I don't care. It just means that I care a whole lot. And I'm sorry if it doesn't come off that way.
I love that answer, and I can relate to that answer, Jay. It's like when I go to a gathering, I talk all day. So when I go to a gathering, I just want to sit in a corner with my tequila and watch people.
And I love your tequila tweets, by the way, Joe Walsh. I look forward to those. I look forward to them. Are you kidding? Tequila tweets are my favorite.
Hey, I am a fan of Jay Black. I have loved getting to know him. I have loved following him on Twitter. Everybody listening to me right now should follow him on Twitter at JBlackIsFunny. At JBlackIsFunny. Check out his website for all things going on with Jay Black. He is a working comedian. jblack.tv. You are a great American. I've learned a lot listening to you. I mean that. I really do. I've learned you should laugh, cry, and learn something new every day. I've learned a couple things from you, my friend. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate you having me on, Joe. This was a real blast. A pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you for listening. Remember to listen, share, and follow White Flag with Joe Walsh on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere great podcasts are found. And be sure to leave a 5-star review. This has been White Flag with Joe Walsh.